So good. Here we are on Palm Sunday. It's so good to see you guys. A number of years ago, early 2000s, I was living up in Northern California. I was in a small town called Sonora. And my buddy and I were taking classes at a local junior college, local community college. I was taking acoustic guitar classes. And so after the class, sometimes we would hang out. But it was like sort of a late night class, this type of stuff. And so it was a little bit late, but we decided we needed to stop by and get some Taco Bell. And I know, it's not Del Taco. Some of you guys are like, I'm going to go ahead and tune him out right now. Please don't do that yet. Wait a little bit longer, then you can tune me out. So we go to the local Taco Bell, and it's super empty. It's super late, of course. And so we get up there, we stand in line, we're looking at this, and there's some I don't know, rumblings. I don't say rumblings. It's not but something's going on. People talking in the back, something like that. Yeah, it's fine, whatever. Like a Chalupa Supreme. That's great. And the girl's taking the order is like, okay. I'm like, all right, cool. I don't think anything too much. And I go and I sit back down with my buddy, and we're waiting to be called. And then we hear this, sort of look over, and the girl who was taking the order is looking. She all of a sudden looks down like this. And of course, in my brain, small town guy, all this stuff. I was like, oh no, did I date her? Oh gosh, I'm an awful human being. I don't even remember her name. So this is going on, and so we're sitting, my buddy and I were talking, and we finally get to the point where they call our numbers, and you go up and you get your thing, and so I go up to get my number, and as I'm trying to get my tray, she's sort of not letting it go, not quite but there's this stall, and I'm like, is everything okay? And she says to me, "You're David Spade, huh?" And I say, no, I'm not David Spade. I'm not David Spade. And she goes, "You are though, huh?" You guys, this is Northern California, middle of nowhere, small town, in the middle of nowhere, small county, in the middle of nowhere, Taco Bell. Late at night. And I say, no, I'm not David Spade. But you are David Spade. I was up to here at this point, right? And so I look at her and I go, yes. I'm David Spade. And from the back you hear, "I told you!" And all of a sudden, people are popping their heads out from the back. The cooks are like, "Look at this, David Spade." And she's like, "Oh my gosh, you're David Spade." And you guys, I could not convince them that I wasn't. But here's the thing. I just want to give you a little warning. If you're ever on eBay looking for David Spade autographs, make sure that it didn't come from Sonora, California. Because I signed autographs as David Spade that night. Now, I wish that there was maybe someone different that I looked like instead of David Spade, but and someone over here was like, "Oh, I see it. Thanks. David Spade, everybody. Archie." So this story, I opened with this story, I started with this story a little bit because it's a story about mistaken identity. I was mistaken for the beautiful David Spade. It still sort of hurts my soul a little bit. Well, today we're talking about Palm Sunday. Today we're looking at Palm Sunday. And on Palm Sunday, the crowd celebrates Jesus as king, but they don't truly understand who he is. See, Palm Sunday is a lot about mistaken identity. I want us to start, and we're going to be looking at John chapter 12, but I want us to actually start going back to Luke chapter 9, verses 18 to 20. And I want to draw our attention there for just a moment. So Luke chapter 9, verses 18 to 20, and it says this. "Now it happened that as he was praying alone, the disciples were with him. And he asked them, 'Who do the crowds say that I am?' And they answered, 'John the Baptist, but others say Elijah, and others that one of the prophets of old has risen.' Then he said to them, 'But who do you say that I am?' And Peter answered, 'The Christ of God.'" Now this happened about halfway through Jesus' ministry. But what's interesting here is as he asked this question, he asked his disciples who the crowd say I am, then he says specifically, "Who do you say that I am?" Shortly after that in Mark, it says that Jesus sets his face towards Jerusalem. I think this is super important because I think in this moment that we just read, even though there's still a lot of time in between where he makes that final journey to Jerusalem, there's a connection. I think that question, who do you say I am, who do the crowd say I am, is directly connected and directly tied into Palm Sunday, into what we're talking about today. So the thing is that we, even today, are being asked that question by Jesus. Who do you say that I am? So let's go ahead and dive in. If you have your handouts, number one, we're going to fill in right now. It is simply this: welcoming the King. Welcoming the King. And now we're going to jump into John chapter 12. We're going to be looking at verses 12 to 13 right now. And it says, the next day, the large crowd that had come to the feast heard that Jesus was coming to Jerusalem. So they took branches of palm trees and went out to meet him, crying out, Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, even the King of Israel. Now, what's going on here, right? This is happening during the Passover celebration. What is the Passover celebration celebrating? What is Passover about? This interactive moment. What is it? Oh, it's Jesus? Okay. Yes. Yeah. Jumping ahead a little bit. What's that? Okay, so right, we're going back to in Jewish history, back to Moses and the plagues, all this type of stuff. And the Passover event was when they slaughtered their lamb and they put it, yes, over the doorframe, exactly, and that the angel of death passed over those that had the blood of the lamb on the doorframe, and so that the firstborn of Egypt, or the firstborn of that household, wasn't killed. Now, directly connected to this, a Passover celebration is actually this sort of larger celebration about what happened next, which was that the Jewish people went from slaves to free, right? And this is really what the Passover celebration is remembering, this idea that they moved from slavery to freedom, right? And so during this celebration, as Jesus is riding in on this donkey, as we're talking about on this Palm Sunday here, what they're doing is that they're being reminded that for the Jews to reflect on their history and to continue to fight for their freedom from oppression. So this is the culture, this is the current, this is what was going on at the time as Jesus is riding into Jerusalem in these moments. People were talking a lot about the Messiah. They were talking a lot about moving from slavery to freedom. They're talking a lot about oppression. When I was in junior high, like most, I'm going to assume most junior hires, I was really into WWF, World Wrestling Federation, right? Like, oh, yeah. So I was like, yeah, some of you guys are still into it. I love this, right? When I was in junior high, you could not beat Hulk Hogan, right? Hulk Hogan, right? 36-inch pythons, man, eat your vegetables and drink your protein. Like this, and it was so wild. Like, it was untouchable. Right, Hulk Hogan was like the best. And in like junior high Boyville, right, there's Hulkamania, right? Like it was like, right? Yeah, like there we go, right? There's Hulkamania. It's just everyone who wanted to be, he was just the raddest thing. Well, during this time, for the Jewish people, it was like Messiah mania. Everyone is an accurate depiction of Jesus. All right, everyone was talking about the Messiah and how this is what was going on in the Passover celebration. The Messiah was on everybody's brain. Freedom from slavery was on everybody's brain. Freedom from oppression, it was on everybody's mind. So this is where Jesus is riding into. All right? Now, the crowd is a bit of a mixed bag, right? We've got Jesus' disciples, which includes the 12. They're there. We've got the people that witnessed the raising of Lazarus. As was talking about, Pastor Jason was talking about that. It was like a tipping point. And these crowds, it was really close. And so they were telling everybody about this Jesus guy and what he was doing. So there was Jesus' disciples in this crowd. There was also those that were just sort of part of the popular crowd. They had maybe heard or seen that Jesus had fed a lot of of people, that he healed people, that, like this idea again that he could be the conquering Messiah that was coming in. And so they were there for sort of their own thing. They wanted to see if Jesus could do something for them. Then there was also the curious crowds. There were those that, I mean, come on, you guys, when we're walking down the street and you see a crowd of people over there yelling, you're sort of like, hey, what's going on over there? Hey, this is pretty cool. Yeah, you're amazing. I don't know who that is. Yeah, you rock. Woo, right? It's like you're just there. You're curious. You're caught up in the moment. You don't know really what's going on, but you're just excited. So there was that part of the crowd there. And then there was also the opposing crowd, right? The Pharisees, the Sadducees, the ones who were like, this guy's an enemy of ours. He's trying to take our power. He's trying to take our people. He's trying to sway people away from him. So this is the mixed bag of the crowd that is in here, right? That is some of them yelling Hosanna, yelling about this. It says that they're spreading palm fronds all around. They're waving them all around. Now this was a symbol of Jewish nationalism and Jewish victory. So this was a very politically charged thing. When you see the palm fronds, it'd be like if you went to a 4th of July parade and everybody is dressed in like red, white, and blue, and we're waving flags and we're singing the Star Spangled Banner or whatever it is, right? This is what's going on as Jesus is riding in here. The other Gospels, it doesn't say this particularly in John, but in other Gospels, it talks about that people laid their cloaks on the ground. And this was something that was actually reserved for kings. It was connected to submission. This idea of submitting yourself, of giving something up for the king. It's connected back to 2 Kings 9, where they're talking about the King Jehu as he rides in. The people lay their cloaks down in front of him. And they begin shouting to Jesus. They start saying, Hosanna. Hosanna, which means, as we now know, save, save, save us. So this idea, right? It's save, salvation. You're crying out. Now, I love Robert Mounts. He's an author. He's a commentator. He's actually was one of the key guys that was part of the crew that was on the ESV translation. He writes this about Hosanna. While the origin and meaning are uncertain, most scholars understand the term as a transliteration of the Hebrew expression that appears in Psalm 118:25 as a cry to the Lord for salvation. Now get this. On the lips of the pilgrim, the people that were crying this out in some time, on the lips of the pilgrims, it is understood announcing that all the Jewish messianic expectations are being fulfilled in Jesus. This is wild. Right? And then they say also, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, even the King of Israel. This idea that blessed is he that comes in the power of Yahweh, as Yahweh's representation, our King, our Messiah. The language here gives no room, any wiggle room, that these people, these crowds that were crying this out, did not see Jesus as King, as Messiah. That is amazing. Other Gospels, it doesn't say this here. They call him the son of David. Who was David? He was king of Israel. In fact, he was considered the best king of Israel. Every other king is compared to David. David conquered. He kicked people out. He ruled. I mean, he brought in power. He gave authority to Israel. And so as they are saying this to Jesus, they are expecting that Jesus, the king, is going to be in the same line and the same vein as David. They are calling Jesus to save them from their oppression, to save them from the Romans, to save them from the slavery that they are in. Now, the thing is, they're right about Jesus being king, but they're wrong about what kind of king Jesus is. It is a story of mistaken identity. Brings us to our next fill-in here. It is that Jesus is a different kind of king. Jesus is a different kind of king. And we see this in John 12:14-15. It says this, "And Jesus found a young donkey and sat on it, just as it is written, Fear not, daughter of Zion. Behold, your king is coming, sitting on a donkey's colt. Now, officials used donkeys for civil processions, non-military processions. The idea is that if someone was important, you could ride a donkey, but not if you're coming in to wage war. It's just coming in as sort of an announcement. Mark 11 says that the colt, the young donkey that Jesus rode in on, is on which no one has ever sat. I thought this was interesting, maybe a little side note here, but has anyone in here ever worked with animals, like particularly horses, breaking horses or anything like that? There's a couple people that are sort of like, yeah. Okay, I'm just going to ask really quick, what is it like to put someone on a horse that no one has ever sat on before? Is that usually smooth? No. Yeah, everybody's like, yeah, you get bucked off, right? There's sort of this craziness going on. They don't want to be ridden on, right? Now, what happens if you're doing that? You're putting a person on a horse or an animal that has never been ridden on and doesn't want to be ridden on, and you also have, as Pastor Jason reminded us, just hundreds and maybe thousands of people yelling and screaming and waving things in their face and throwing things at them. Does that seem like it's a good idea? No, it seems like a bad idea, right? So just as we observe this, do you think that Jesus just happened to get lucky enough to pick a colt that was like the most chill colt that's ever been in existence of anything? He's like, sure, if you want to ride, that's cool, bro. It doesn't bother me. No. I love this because even in this small detail, we're seeing Jesus exerting a power over nature which only, according to the Old Testament, belongs to God. Wow. Jesus rides in on a colt that's never been ridden on through a crowd of screaming people, throwing things, and it's just smooth as butter. Jesus is demonstrating that he is God in this way. Now, the messianic prophecy that we just read in John is from Zechariah 9:9, and is talking about that the Messiah, the King, would come as a sign of peace, not war. Again, Jesus rode in on a donkey, a colt, not a war horse. See, the Messiah, according to the Old Testament, was not going to be a military ruler. Now, the Jewish Sadducees, Pharisees, and people largely ignored this prophecy because it didn't fit in with their assumptions of what the Messiah was supposed to be like. Today, we call that confirmation bias, right? Where we ignore things that are facts because it doesn't fit into the pictures that we've painted. There's nothing new under the sun. We do it now, they did it then. Now, this is known as a triumphal entry. I think there's an interesting idea of this is that I think it's actually a paradoxical sense because the king that's coming in this triumphant moment, his victory will come only by way of being nailed to a cross. And so here, as these people are crying out, Hosanna, save us, they're crying out to the King of Israel, the one who will end oppression, the one who will free us. Jesus is intentionally redefining kingship as humility, as service, as a peaceful king. See, people saw Jesus as coming as a king of war. That he was going to conquer Rome, right? That he was going to give his followers power to rule over their enemies. But Jesus was coming that day as a king of peace, saying, I'm going to conquer sin and death. And I'm going to give my followers power, but the power to serve their enemies. See, Jesus was a different kind of king. Number 3, the king of the confused. Jesus was the king of the confused. We see this in John 12:16-19. It says this, his disciples did not understand these things at first, but when Jesus was glorified, when they remembered that these things had been written about him and had been done to him, the crowd that had been with him when he called Lazarus out of the tomb and raised him from the dead continued to bear witness. The reason why the crowd went to meet him was that they had heard he had done this sign. So the Pharisees said to one another, you see that they are gaining nothing. Look, the world has gone after him. Now again, you have to remember, right, this crowd is a mixed bag. It's disciples, it's popular crowd, it's people wanting things, it's his enemies. There's a whole lot going on. But what's true about, I would say, everyone in this crowd is that no one actually really got it. No one really got who Jesus was and what he was doing. They thought maybe he was just a healer. They thought maybe he was just a teacher. Maybe he was just a prophet. They thought he was the coming conquering king that was going to break the oppression. Some of them thought that Jesus was their enemy and wanted him dead. Matthew 21 tells us this in verse 10 through 11. And when he entered Jerusalem, the whole city was stirred up, saying, who is this? The whole city was agitated. There's something going on. Thousands of people were coming to see this man ride in. And it shook people up, because no one that comes into the city like that should be having this type of reception. It was hard for the people to understand. And they say, who gets a welcome like this? Who is this? And then verse 11 says, and the crowd said, this is the prophet Jesus from Nazareth of Galilee. Again, the crowd right there gives us a very incomplete answer. Was he a prophet? Yes. Was he from Galilee? Yes. Was he a king? Yes. Was he a Messiah? Yes. But what they missed is that he was the prophet. He was the king. He was the Messiah. That Jesus was God in flesh. He was Emmanuel. And they missed that. They missed that day. He was the servant that talked about in Zechariah. And they missed it. That he was, on that day, coming into the city, the Passover lamb. Among the Passover celebration and the Passover fervor. See, they missed it, and because they missed it, the same city that shouted Hosanna would in a few days shout, crucify him. Hosanna, save us, save, changed to crucify him. I think this moment reveals in this crowd probably a shallow faith, probably a lot of emotional worship caught up in the moment as Jesus is coming in. It definitely shows, though, spiritual blindness. They were blinded by the enemy. And I think it reveals to us that we can be close to Jesus, we can celebrate Jesus, we can even talk about Jesus and still not truly know who he is. We can still be confused. So, what do we draw from this? What does all this point us to? How can we apply this in our life? How can this help us see God? I'm glad you asked that. Because in the next section, we've got some ideas. Palm Sunday reveals a God who chooses humility. A God who chooses humility. Jesus came not in power, but in humility, riding on a colt, not a war horse. There was no royal procession coming with him. I mean, I grew up, I love Disney. I love Disney movies, all that type of stuff. I grew up in these type of things. You guys ever seen like the original Aladdin, Robin Williams, right? And that whole scene, like, right, if you don't watch this, I guess spoiler, but if you haven't watched it, you know what, it's 30 years too late. Right, so Prince Ali, he gets his wishes and he's like, I want to be rich and powerful so the princess loves me. And so, the genie's like, you got it, right? And that whole, the whole scene, like, Prince Ali, wonderful. And there's monkeys and there's galore. And yeah, Justin's like, yeah, I remember that. Yeah. Like there's this whole huge procession and it's super royal. And everyone's like, whoa, this is impressive. That is the complete opposite of what Jesus did. He just rode in. No fanfare, no procession. He didn't make an announcement. He came in completely disarmed. There were no guards around him. He just said, I'm here, I'm humble, I'm vulnerable. And Jesus reveals God's character. Colossians 1:15 says this. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. When you see Jesus, you see God. And I think this begs an honest reflection for us. How do we see God? How do I see God? How do you see God? Is he primarily this forceful, efficient, triumphant God who just comes in kicking and screaming? Or are we open to encountering a God who comes in weakness, who comes in gentleness, who comes with restraint? A God who comes and chooses humility. Palm Sunday also reveals a God who is faithful, not reactive. Our next fill-in is this. He is faithful, not reactive. Jesus didn't change because people cheered. And he didn't change later because they jeered. He didn't alter his path to retain the crowd's approval. He knew the mission and he stuck to it. God is not swayed by our applause or our abandonment. He has a mission and he will accomplish it. Psalm 33:11 says this, the counsel of the Lord stands forever, the plans of his heart to all generations. Because this is true, you guys, we can be confident that God's character is consistent. What a beautiful thing. He doesn't sway, he doesn't shift like sand under your feet. He is consistent. He is no more present in your life when it's going well, or less present in your life when you're struggling. He is there. He is with you always. And guys, I think this frees us, knowing that he is faithful, not reactive, that we can come before him with our doubts, our questions. We're doing a study right now in EYG called Questionable. And one of the idea is I want students to feel free to ask anything. And we look at it from a biblical perspective. And the very first lesson I taught on was the lesson of, now I can't remember his name. Who wrestled with God? What's his name? Jacob, thank you. Jacob, wrestling with God. And the idea I said was, listen, God's not afraid for you to wrestle with him. But Jacob continued. Even in his wrestling, he held on to God. He wasn't going to give up until he got the answer. When we come before God, a God who is faithful, not reactive, and we come with our real doubts and our real questions, God does not shy away from that. He can take it, trust me. Trust me. Next, Palm Sunday reveals a God who draws near to suffering intentionally. He draws near to suffering intentionally. Did Jesus know that Palm Sunday would lead to the cross? Yes. Yeah, this is good theology here. Yes. Right, Jesus knew, right, that Palm Sunday would lead to the cross. And this reveals to us a God who purposely moved towards suffering, towards betrayal, towards rejection. He didn't move away from it. Because I think that we can trust that God is present during our own personal pain. Check out Isaiah 43, 1b to 2. It says this, "Fear not, for I have redeemed you." Bless you. "I've called you by name. You are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And through the rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. When you walk through fire, you shall not be burned, and the flame shall not consume you." God is not only our rescuer, but He is our companion. His love is not proven by our escape from suffering, but by Him dwelling in it with us. Palm Sunday assures us that we can bring our fear, we can bring our grief, we can bring our disillusionment into prayer, and we can do so without shame. We don't have to be ashamed of those things because God has already met us there. He is with us. He is not forsaking us. And Palm Sunday also encourages us that we can be people who, like Jesus, moved intentionally into the suffering of others. When I lost my dad, it's one of the most painful experiences in my life. And I can't tell you what a blessing it was when I had brothers and sisters in Christ who just rushed in. Man, I knew in those moments that God was real. He is a God that moves towards suffering intentionally. One last thought. One final thought. And as I do this, if the band wants to start making their way forward, but I'll end with this. Do we recognize Jesus as king on His terms? Do we recognize Jesus as king on His terms? You see, in Matthew, the crowd asked, "Who is this?" The sermon title is actually, right, "Who do you say that I am?" I argued that we are still, to this day, even today, as we celebrate Palm Sunday, the triumphal entry, we are being asked by God, "Who do you say that I am?" That question is still relevant. It's still now. Was He just a teacher? Was He just a prophet? Is He just a tradition you hold to? Or is He the King? Is He the Messiah? If you're struggling through that, and even if you're not, I want you guys to turn over your the backside of on there. This is an opportunity this week. Today, right, is the beginning of Holy Week. This is the first day of Holy Week. And if you scan that QR code with your smartphone, or you enter that address on the back, or if you want to scan that really quick, it'll take you to the ESV Walk Through the Week with Jesus. And you guys, it is amazing. You can spend each day just reading about what Jesus did. Spending time with Him on the day. On Monday, He did this. On Tuesday, Him and the disciples did this. It's really awesome. And you guys, it can prepare us, and it can challenge us, and it can remind us to meet Jesus as King on His terms. So, let me pray, and we'll continue to celebrate Palm Sunday, the triumphal entry and the idea, the reality that Jesus is King.